There, everyone.
Hi,
Hello,
everyone. How
everyone.
are we today?
Hey, doing good. How y'all doing? How y'all doing, ladies?
We're doing
Very
great.
good.
Well,
Good, good.
All right, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the Roundtable, the Principal's Perspective. We are your host, Janine Leach, and
Lisa Casellas.
we'd like to welcome Sherry Dixon. She's an author, podcaster, administrator, TED Talk speaker, owns her own consulting company. Welcome, Sherry. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you for having me.
And we also like to welcome Rod Laws. His experiences range from being a Spanish teacher, dean of students, assistant principal, principal. Welcome, Rod. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you.
So let's talk. This is the round table. So we're going to talk about everyday stuff, things that we come across in our work life. So let's talk, shall we? The topic of today is data informed decision making. So please, anyone feel free to jump in. I have a lot to say on that, I'm sure, as well as Rod, Sherry, and Lisa do as well. So who would like to start first?
Well, I'll just start from a general principle perspective. Data, I love data. It does sometimes bring up some hard feelings for staff when you start talking about, well, where's the data? What does the data show? I think part of our role is really empowering educators to understand how data will help drive their instruction, make their instruction better. And when it's done right, it actually makes a lot of their jobs easier. It's just sometimes it's a very hard sell because teachers and assistants, they hear data and they automatically think, I don't have time to do data. I don't really know what data is. I don't know what I'm collecting data on. So those are some of the obstacles that I see frequently in a school, in many of the schools that I've worked at. And I've seen a big turnaround once there is more of the staff embraces it. So I'm interested to hear what your perspectives are because Sherry and Rod, you've both worked in such a wide variety of fields. I think data is a constant in education. I'd really like to hear. So Sherry, can we start with you? What are your thoughts about data-driven instruction, the effectiveness of it, and the challenges?
Absolutely. So I love this question as well because data drives everything, right? If we're not getting results, then we have to step back and review what are we doing? Are we moving in the right direction? But you are absolutely right when you say teachers have a hard time with that sometimes. And I think it's because they put too much personal into it. And they have to remove that personal because the data is the data, the numbers, right? Being a former turnaround principal, each of the three campuses that I had to work within, I was the new administrator coming in. So I was the person, the savior, right? So to speak. And every one of those schools, they were struggling because of a specific set of things, and it was a pattern. You could see it. But one of the things was data was not a priority. They were just doing what they wanted or what they felt like they should do. And I think you hit it, Lisa, when you said teachers sometimes don't even know really what data to look at or why or how. And I will say this, and I don't know how long all of y'all have been within the field. I'm older than I look. I took on my first principal position in 2006. And even as a teacher, we didn't have computerized anything at that point, right? And so we had to dig and do our own data dives. And our principal was so good about teaching us how to do that. And I'm in Texas, so you know we've had experience with testing. We're like the testing kings and queens around here. Um, but I know that the world shifted, and especially since the pandemic in particular, we rely so much on technology right now, and it is out there. It can give you all of those pieces, but it can almost be overwhelming for how much it can give you for a teacher. And I do fear sometimes that when teachers are looking, they're really not looking at what they need to be looking at. And that is something that I always put as a priority when I went into schools because nobody's going to care what the outcome is if they don't know what the outcome really means.
Absolutely.
And so, in my experience, um, I walked into a school that had not done anything with data. In my undergrad program, in my grad program, it was full of analysis of data because data pretty much it runs everything. It lets us know what we need to improve on. It lets us know things that are working. And I just believe that your feelings and emotions don't run a school. And so we have to have that data. Um, Data, everything from what behavior interventions we need to which programs and which curriculum, works best for which one gets the best results. That's the one that we need to go with. And in my experience, walking into a school that had not used data, I had to be intentional. So I like to communicate ahead of time, like what the vision is, what the mission is, and what we're going to do to get there. And so part of the getting to the mission, part of executing the mission is looking at data. And like Sherry, like I think you said, Lisa, too, we have to really educate our staff. And it has to be continuous PD. It can't be a once and done PD. It's going to be continuous during PLCs, professional learning communities. If there is a staff meeting or a staff development that we do once a month, part of it has to be um, continued practice on data dives. It has to be a continuous process from day one all the way to the end of the school year so that teachers can see exactly what data they need. And like Sherry said, um, it really is about educating the teachers. Like she said in her first, back in 2006, I was in high school in 2006. No, I was in college in 2006. Um, but like you said, it's all about being intentional and educating the teachers on the data that they're using. So I agree with everything here.
So I'm going to put this one further. So data can mean a lot of different things. And I think teachers, as an AP going in and mentoring teachers, they need to trust the process and they need to trust the data. And I think sometimes they don't, and I don't know why. And you talk about Rod being purposeful and intentional and things like that. And I think that, I keep telling them your data is going to be, your evidence on how you communicate that data is very important. What you want the students to learn, what they are learning, what they still need to learn, how to improve on the concepts and skills that they're struggling with. Um, and I feel like that's just the basic. But when you talk about students and you get into fifth and sixth grade, and I could say this when I was a teacher and I taught typical students, um, they go through so many changes personally, on how they develop. And I find that, the highest achieving students, when they transition to that fifth and sixth grade level, they don't know how to deal with the things that they're going through physically. Socially, things are changing for them. And parents are used to their students, their baby boy, their baby girl achieving. But when they hit those types of things, issues, when they get into that middle school, um, situations with other students, with friends dealing with certain issues, their grades might be slipping. The only thing a teacher has to back up and to communicate clearly on what these students are struggling with is their data. Because otherwise parents, they won't believe it. They won't believe it. They don't believe that their baby could be, struggling with some issues socially, struggling with some academics because they've been such high achievers this whole time. And it doesn't mean that they aren't high achievers, just that they're going through some issues. So data is so important on so many different levels.
And Janine, just to piggyback off of what you just said, part of what I did as an administrator was not only was I intentional in communicating to the students and to the staff, but I was also intentional in communicating with parents as well. During our parent we had parent education, and we called it Parent U. And part of Parent U, Parent University, what we called it Parent U, part of that was really letting the parents know, hey, this is the data that we use, and this is how we determine where your students are, where their strengths and their areas of growth are, and what you can do at home as parents to support us in making sure that our data trends in the upward direction. So I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said in regards to involving the parents in that process as well.
And can I jump in? Because Rod, you bring up such a good point, and this is the other thing about data that I think is so crucial, and we all miss the mark on this so many times. Data tells a story. So what you said, Janine and Rod, and the whole thing about the data should tell us what's happening with the student. So when you see data slipping, you come together as your PLC or your team, or you get the right people involved and you say, what's going on? When you see kids making huge progress, you start asking the question, what's happening? Because they're actually learning and growing and making these big gains. Everything about data tells a story. And sometimes when we think about teachers being maybe a little afraid of their data, I do think, especially in my experiences, not my own campuses themselves, but just in general in the districts that I've worked in, data almost becomes an I got you. And if your data's not there, well, you're on the chopping block. So I coined a phrase not too long ago. I call it accountability with empathy, because I think we have to remember, yes, achievement, objective data, all of that is so important. Turning our schools around is so important. I wouldn't have done what I did all these years if I didn't believe that. But it's not just about a test score. It has to be about, are we giving value? And that's not just to kids, but that's to our staff as well. If we have a staff member struggling with their data, that's another story. We need, as the leaders, to step in and say, okay, what's happening here? How can we help? Now, if the teacher's like, nope, I'm good, never mind, just leave me alone, that's a different conversation. But most teachers, they're just terrified that the data is going to tell them you don't have a job. I don't know if y'all get any of our news, what's happening right now. And I shouldn't even talk about this district because I don't work there. I don't live within that district, but we have a very large district in our city. That's all I'm going to say about that, right? You can figure out what it is. But people are getting fired all the time. And we're talking about teachers all the way up to principals. They're getting fired within months of being on campuses right now because the state is in the process of enforcing some specific guidelines for these schools because they've been failing for so long. And the superintendent is utilizing all of the programs for the state. And people are fearful and they're worried. And then what's going to happen is the people that go and apply for those jobs, they're not going to be your top caliber people. So I think we have a two-sided coin here. We have data can really help us when we use it. And I think, Lisa, you said that, when we use it in the best manner, but it also can be detrimental to a lot of people. And even all the way down to our students, if we're not careful with how we use it as an I got you kind of tool, as a chopping block. I don't know. I'm on a soapbox. I should probably step off for a minute.
I think that was a really great point you make, because part of the angst I see when I introduce data or talk about data is you can almost feel the tension, because their first initial reaction is, how is this going to harm me? How is this going to look poorly on me? Maybe because I don't know how to take data correctly. I don't understand the purpose of the data. So I think it's a great conversation to be had, because that is the initial resistance you get when you speak to somebody, especially if they've not used data and seen the benefits of it. That initial reaction is, this is going to be a gotcha, and something might happen that I don't want to happen. So I appreciate you saying that.
And Lisa, to piggyback off of what you said, and Sherry, I think also, and I may be wrong in saying this, and if I'm wrong, I'll take it back. but a lot of these undergraduate teacher prep programs are not really emphasizing data analysis in terms of in terms of the methodology for teaching. Now, I know about they emphasize pedagogy, they emphasize um, the differentiation of the concepts, but I don't see very much, and I don't remember ever experiencing very much information about data analysis. So it's almost like for in the principal prep program now, there are classes, we have classes on data analysis and how we are to use that data to project school growth. And we have that. But for undergrad, for teacher prep programs, there's not much emphasis in some states on data analysis. But yet, when they get into the profession, there's this expectation that they are to use the numbers. And that creates part of that angst as well, is the fact that they were not properly prepared in
Mhm.
these undergrad programs.
I agree. I feel like they focus on lesson planning and student outcomes. Well, they don't necessarily teach on how to get to those outcomes, right? They just expect teachers coming into the field to be experts on data analysis and know how to do it. They need a lot of mentorship with that. They need a lot of professional development with that as well. And it has to be ongoing throughout their professional career because, as we know, some teachers may be stagnant. They may not switch up their lessons every year. They're not writing or creating plans for individualized students. They're not understanding that all students are not standardized. Like I know in here in New York State, we're big on standardized testing,
Mhm.
but we talk about differentiating instruction, but the state doesn't necessarily change the way we provide tests for our students. So I feel like there is definitely a big need for schools that are teaching our teachers coming into the field. They have to have a different approach to it. They have to definitely take some time out and talk about data because I have teachers coming to me and as an assistant principal saying, I don't know what to write for goals. I don't know, and I say, okay, let's look at the data. Let's look at the data. And I feel like sometimes it's the furthest thought from their mind is to use that data to look at student progression, to look at where they need to create new measurable goals for that student to be supported and achieve the expectations of the classroom. So there's a lot of holes to this.
And
It
I
just
know
comes
in,
down to education.
sorry, I'm sorry,
No,
I
go
didn't.
ahead, Ron.
And I know in my state as well, a lot of teachers, especially the ones who don't have a standardized assessment, um, they're not as motivated to, I'm not going to say they're not motivated to achieve, but they're just not as, it just seems like they're not as motivated because our educator value added system, EVOS, pretty much determines the top tier teachers in our state. And those top tier teachers in our state get compensated for their achievement. Um, and if they fall within that -2 to +2 range in terms of their growth over the years leading to the previous school year, they're getting money for that. But it's for of course, math, English, and then in high school there's biology but it only happens kindergarten through 8th grade. It doesn't happen in any other grade level. So and I see a lot of complaints on social media sites for teachers about that. And so I just know that that plays a major role as well in terms of um, the lack of motivation, if you will, because it's like at the beginning of the school year when principals are when teachers come in and they're ready to start the school year. It's like, this is what the data said last year. This is, we did a solid job in this. So these are our glows, and then these are our grows, and this is what we're going to focus on this year. So when all that's happening, teachers are excited. They're like, yes, let's go. Yes. But then as time goes on, and like the middle of the school year comes, it's like at the beginning of the year, full throttle, vroom, vroom, vroom. And then the middle of the school year comes, it's like vroom, vroom. And then toward the end of the school year, after, burnouts happening, the realization that, hey, students are not going to meet growth, they're not going to meet goals for the year. Vroom. So it's just like that highly motivated to that. And I mean, I was, as a teacher, I taught an elective class, so I wasn't a part of that educator value added system, but I think that the value that my subject area added to the tested areas, um, I actually enjoyed, not only doing the data for my class, but actually sitting in with the team for that grade level, and how are we doing, how are our students doing as grade level, in all areas, and including SEL, using the assessment that we use for SEL, the Panorama survey. Got some really good data from that as well, in terms of how our students are handling school life, what areas they need growth in. So it's like all encompassing and using that data, but it's like teacher motivation is a big part of it. You got some teachers who are motivated to do good, and you got some teachers who are just there in existence. Um, and last thing I want to say, it's just like this meme that I saw. I don't know, you probably have all seen it on social media, but it's the meme. It's like a four quadrant meme. It's like teacher in year one, and it's like, attentive, like ready to go, right? And then teacher in year five is like, we're there, we're taking notes and whatever. Teacher in year 10 and above is like, so so I know as time goes on and all these new trends are happening and all these, the data tells us this and the data tells us that, and then we got this new system, this new program, and it's like teachers are having to constantly adapt. And I know that plays a major role as well. So I just wanted to say that.
There's always trends. The one thing that does stay the same is good data. Like that's what really helps drive education. And I love what you said, Rod, about your parent university. I think letting parents know this is the data we use and we're going to use for your child and all the students in here is a great tool and a great way to get buy-in. So I want to thank you for sharing that. And I do try to model data whenever I can, even if it's informal data. So I had a teacher years ago who was teaching in a class. She was in the first grade class. And one of the students, their mom called me and said the little girl was going home crying every day because the teacher never called on her during morning meeting. Never, never, never. Always called on the boys. So I spoke with the teacher, and the teacher said, I call on everybody equally. And this was a very established teacher. She really was a great teacher. And I said, okay. And so one day I went in during morning meeting and I just made check marks. And she called on the boys way more than she called on the girls. And I met with her at the end of the day and she was surprised. She had no idea. And I just showed her, this is the data I took during your 30-minute morning meeting. This is how many times you called on boys. And this is how much data that's simple. And she said, I really didn't realize that I called on the boys that much more than the girls. Kind of made her a data believer. Like, yeah, you have to suspend sometimes what you think, or what you feel, and just go with what's right there in front of you. And that's what it says. And that's what helps make instruction better.
Yeah, I agree. And all right, so I mean, we could go. I love talking about data because it really reaches to every single facet of education, how we think about students, what we think they should learn, what students are learning. So I want to get to our final thoughts. Let's talk about our final thoughts about data. Sherry?
Well, as I said, I think that it is crucial for us to ensure that regardless of what prep program our employees have come from, whether they have had one, I don't know what things look like in all of y'all's states, but we have districts hiring people that have not even had a prep program right now because the teacher shortage is so tough. We, as campus principals, have to step in and say, this is my business. And I don't know if I would have said that in that same manner prior when I was just serving as the principal, but stepping away and starting a business, I've learned so much. And running a school is like running a business. There's no difference. But we need to look at it as, this is our organization. We're the CEO. And we can't control what happened before people walked into our building. And we can't control what's going to happen when they walk out. But we can control when we have them. And if we have people that are concerned about equity with pay, because we have that here in Texas too, and it's caused major things. I've been involved in things where campuses have cheated on stuff because they wanted that incentive pay, and it's coming back around. It went away for a while, it's coming back around, and now there's animosity between staff, just like you said, Rod. And it can get ugly. It can get real ugly. But the bottom line, data isn't going away. We all have said it paints the picture of what is happening. When we can embrace it in the best way, that's going to continually keep us on a path of adding value. And when we understand it and dig into it the right way and support those that are working with us on our teams, that's when we see improvement. I've been there. I've turned schools around in 1 year that people never thought would happen. And it wasn't just test scores, it was everything about those campuses, those communities. And it was all because we utilized it in the right way.
Lisa?
So I'll just say again that I believe in data. There have been just so many examples of data telling the story when the person thought something differently. It's always, it seems to be like sometimes teachers, if they're going to a parent-teacher conference and they don't have any concrete data with them, they're just thinking back on the last week. Well, could he do that last week? What happened last week? But that's not concrete when you have the data there to show the progress over time, the hills and the valleys. That's what really paints a picture. I do think that we have to train our staff on how to do data. I agree with Rod and Sherry. A lot of students come into teaching and don't know anything about data. It sounds so far into education. Like education doesn't sound like those two go together. So we really have to work on training our educational staff on how to take data, the importance of it, and what it can do for all the students.
Rod, final thoughts?
Can't see this. It says, show me the data. And it's actually a gift from a colleague, but this is when I created the intentionality of
Oh.
My final thought is just be intentional. So part of being intentional, once again, is finding um, user-friendly language in terms of data for all stakeholders that are within your school building as well as out in the community. And we have to be intentional in how we communicate the message as leaders. We have to be intentional in terms of the action steps that we're going to take. And we need to be intentional in terms of how we're going to communicate those action steps and how we plan to execute. And Sherry stole my thought that that principals really are CEOs of schools. And let's think about a CEO and what a CEO does. A CEO's main purpose is duplication, right? And so when I say that is, there's a director of this and the director of that and the director like whatever, however they choose to duplicate themselves. But in order for them to know what things they need for duplication, they have to look at data. They can't duplicate based on feelings. They can't duplicate based on emotions. They can't duplicate based on how the winds are faring that day. It has to be based on numbers. What does the number say? So that's always going to be a question that I ask when I step into the classroom with a teacher. Like, what does the number say? When I'm speaking to the custodian, in terms of the material orders, like what the head custodian, like what do the numbers say? From your end, the numbers on my end say we're spending too much money on supplies. What do the numbers say on your end? When we're talking about the bookkeepers, the not the bookkeeper, the person that's in charge of finance at the school, like what does the number say in terms of how much do we have to spend on this program? We're spending too much money on programming. So it all goes back to the numbers. And some people are number folks. They're afraid of numbers. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's a word today. So just being intentional is pretty much the theme, like the message for me in terms of data, being intentional on how that data is shared in terms of, and also being intentional about action steps that we're going to take for school improvement.
That's great. I agree with all of you. I think you guys brought up some very major valid points. I think it does have to be intentional, purposeful. I think teachers should be developed and throughout their entire career. Um, I like what Sherry said, more than a test score. These kids, these students, these families, our communities, they're more than just a test score, and data can open up a lot of things to us realizing how we could help them. So I think that's definitely important. And it's all about show me the data. It's all about that. That's right, right? I love that. But thank you, Sherry, Rod. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really enjoyed you guys being a guest speaker on our podcast.
Wonderful.
Please click like and subscribe to the channel. And please leave your thoughts in the comments below. So thank you guys, Sherry, Rod, so much. We hope that you will join us again and take care, okay? Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
See you next time.